Take us to that meeting that occurred last week. What were the arguments for not removing it? You were there, the other side. You obviously disagree with the side. What were the arguments that you remember being presented for the other side?
As I recall, it was a question of my bringing up and the committee feeling like they were locked in to only selecting either Ann Davis or William F. Yardley. I did have an amendment that corrected that and used those two great Tennesseans as examples, but saying replace the bust with an elected individual from Tennessee that's more deserving to be there, and that the Nathan Bedford Forrest bust be set in a more suitable environment, be it a state park or some private park and or a museum. So I had an amendment that the committee did not take up that adjusted that language. The biggest thing was committee members felt like we had to be locked into two choices. And then there was some individuals through testimony that was taking up misinformation that were just trying to do away with history as a whole or somehow dishonoring history, which is not the case. We're trying to move forward and show that we are a more progressive state, and we want to end this contention and bring some positive light, not negative light, to the state of Tennessee.
The Sons of Confederate Veterans were opposed to this, right? And they gave a few reasons. And then there was a vote about deferring, and it went along party lines. Is that right?
Right.
And so what was that vote? It was Democrats voted
to take up the resolution and not defer.
Right.
And my colleagues on the Republican aisle decided to defer and not take up the resolution. And that's not the kind of message that you want to send out on a national stage. It was my intention, it was my hope from the very beginning that we could do this in a bipartisan effort and do it in unification for the sake of how we're being portrayed on the national level for public consumption, which can be looked at as a negative, especially when you have individuals give testimony that you can interpret as defending treating human beings less than animals who look like me. So that's a bit of an issue.
The issue, do you feel like the big issue here is who goes in that place? Is it about who replaces the bust, or is it about protecting that bust? Is it about not wanting to remove Nathan Bedford Forrest, or is there a real debate, fight, concern, issue about who actually would go there if we were to remove it?
The curious thing about it, is it any of those things, or is it just a symbol of not wanting to accept change? Because if you accept change, are you afraid of what's coming instead of embracing it? It's almost as if Nathan Bedford Forrest bust is just emblematic of people's fear of wanting to move on and the unknown that comes with change. Instead of working together to try to see what changes come and have that discussion about where do we move from here. Because I'm gonna tell you, when I went around and talked to my colleagues on both sides of the aisle, they had some great ideas about who should go there. Some were really tired of the argument. There were even some that thought it should have been moved on both sides of the aisle. So if we're having that kind of discussion, let's take the lead on this. Let's show Tennesseans, let's show people across the nation, especially those in D.C., that we know how to work together in difficult situations, and we're not afraid of change.
You're not locked into it needs to be replaced with one of the people you suggested.
Right.
You're open to other ideas. Is that right?
I am. You have Sergeant York. Of course, I already mentioned Representative Ann Davis. Lois DeBerry is known on the national stage still to this day. What Senator Baker has been able to do and the legacy that he left as he served this great state. We have some opportunities to honor some great Tennesseans, and why not take advantage of that? We could get a bust of old Ned McWhorter up there, buddy. Who would like to see old Ned Ray?
And I think another argument that you hear is the notion of a slippery slope, or something to that effect. If we remove this one bust, then what's next? We start removing this or this or this. When you hear the argument about a slippery slope, you know, what do you say?
Conjecture. It's just a distraction. There's no slippery slope when we know that this has been a contentious issue for decades, and we know how we're looking on the national stage, and the division that is being shown is not who we are as a governing body. We are not that divided. We're not at each other's throat. I do not serve with a body of racists that do not respect my history and what slaves have been through. It's not indicative of who we are, and I just thought this was a great opportunity to show, once again, unification, a respect for both sides and both histories. Let's remove this bus and get that controversial figure out of the building and replace it with a deserving Tennessean. There's
not a plan after this bust is removed to go and get the next bust, right? I mean, there's not some other bust after this. You're focused on this particular individual that's causing so much division. And so there's not 5 resolutions waiting just to remove people from the state. And then there's not a more contentious figure on display in the state capitol than Nathan Bedford Forrest. So the discussion about there's a slippery slope, if it's slippery, it's wet with the blood of the slaves that were abused and murdered, that this gentleman helped sell, helped show that their lives did not matter and they were less than human. If it's slippery, it's wet with their red blood. We're about to go to break. That's very heartfelt. That's very compelling. That is not what the other side says, right? I mean, I guess, how does the other side, and we've had the other side on from time to time, but I want to, what do they say? You're saying, and his history is his history. I mean, he is a former Confederate general. He's a former slave trader. He's an early KKK leader. Now, you know, you hear the other side say something about he reformed and by the time he died and this kind of thing. But do you think, is it one or the other? I mean, how could you support this bust being there and not have tendencies that are just not good? Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean? Is it possible or not in your point of view?
What you have to look at, what is the ultimate goal here? What are we really wanting to do? And are we speaking to an idea that should be long past? Or are we looking to celebrate the rich and unique history that Tennessee has? Unfortunately, our history is being tainted by just one piece of being told. But there is some beautiful history that goes beyond racial lines in Tennessee that we don't have the opportunity to hear because it's being drowned out by figures like Nathan Bedford Forrest. Maryville College in East Tennessee was the first college to allow for even slaves to be educated, college educated. That's a beautiful story. How many Tennesseans know that? Not many, because I know people that serve up here that are from Blount County that didn't even know that. We don't get to tell that story because we're so distracted with the loud noises that divide us. And I just believe that if we're going to move forward as a state, we're going to have to do it together and not be afraid of that change. Embrace it together.
And the time has come. All right, we are going to take a break. We have several calls. If you want to call in, there's the number, 615-737-PLUS, 615-737-7587. We'll take a break. Be back right after this.